we are not the same people as women every single day of the month. Every single day, we are a little bit different because of our chemistry, because of our physiology, and because of how our hormones fluctuate. This is why learning what the infradian rhythm is matters, especially when it comes to our health and wellness. Because again, so often women say to themselves, well, what's wrong with me? Well, why don't I feel this way? Or why don't I feel that way? Or why does training feel harder on certain days? Or why do I feel ravenous at certain points in my cycle? And, why do things potentially feel so hard for me to figure out? And this is really the key that I want to empower you with. As women, we have something called our infradian rhythm. And this is different from circadian rhythm, which you may be aware of. And so when we talk about wellness, we talk about life, we talk about how we function, we talk about what our day-to-day looks like. So often we're working off our circadian rhythm, the 24-hour clock that happens in the world that we live in. And when we think about circadian rhythm, it's the 24-hour body clock. But the thing that we have to understand about us as women is we have a second clock, the infradian rhythm, which is a 28-day cycle clock. And that's something that we start to experience and dive into more and more as we get into menstruation, reproductive ages, etc. We need to kind of really think about breaking down what this means because it's so important for our overall energy, our overall mood, understanding our wellness, our health, our vitality, and so much more. What we haven't really been taught is how our infradian rhythm or our cycle, our 28-day menstrual cycle, etc., how that impacts our brain chemistry, our metabolism, our energy, our stress, how we want to socialize, and so much more. And so as a coach, one of the things that I teach inside of my programming is this idea of working with your cycle. This is a concept that I've learned through other experts and other mentors that I've been working with for the past handful of years. Through the Sync community, which is one of the certification processes I went through, I learned a lot about what are the phases of the cycle? What is the infradian rhythm? Why does this matter for us as women? And why do we actually have to get in tune with what this looks like for our health? The biggest thing is because we haven't been taught. And this is one of the key drivers to how we feel in our day-to-day. So let's quickly talk about the cycle overall. Maybe you know a little bit about the cycle. Maybe you're still learning about the cycle. Maybe you know some things, but you want to get educated on other things. So the 4 phases of the cycle are our menstruation phase, our follicular phase, our ovulatory phase, and then our luteal phase or luteal phase. Some people say it different ways. I say luteal. I like to say that most of the time. But regardless, those are the ways that each phases are named. And in each phase, our hormones are doing different things. So estrogen is rising in the beginning of our cycle. So after menstruation into follicular, that's when estrogen is rising. And then at the back half of our cycle, that's when estrogen starts to dive off and progesterone starts to rise. And there's a lot of other things happening beyond what I want to talk about today hormonally. But what you want to understand at the surface is that there's a lot that's changing every single day. And I've talked about this before in the podcast. We are not the same people as women every single day of the month. Every single day, we are a little bit different because of our chemistry, because of our physiology, and because of how our hormones fluctuate. This is why learning what the infradian rhythm is matters, especially when it comes to our health and wellness. So when we're talking about things like our fitness or our productivity, how energized we feel, so often we have been boxed into or conditioned into believing that we're supposed to continue to follow the 24/7 circadian rhythm clock, and we're not always working with our physiology. This is often why women can sometimes feel super burned out, super tired, super overrun, and not necessarily in tune with or grounded in how they actually feel day to day. I know for me personally, and I see this with my clients, this is a very real thing. And until you start to get educated about our 28-day cycle, what that actually looks like from a physiological level and how we change every single day, the more we don't really understand exactly what it is that we need. And so this is why I want to encourage you to really start to grasp this idea of infradian rhythm and start to implement some of this knowledge into your day-to-day life so you can really take care of yourself with intention. And you can really think about what's going to serve you at different points of the month or based on energy, mood, and so much more to really help you feel like you're working with your physiology. So much of what we do most often in our day-to-day ignores infradian rhythm. You know, this is something that we haven't really been empowered to understand. We haven't really been taught exactly what this means. And so because of that, most of us have been working against our physiology, against our infradian rhythm for most of our life. And I will tell you, as someone who has slowly started to learn more about the power of syncing with your cycle and syncing more of your energy with your infradian rhythm, the more you just feel a little bit more. We'll get back to our conversation shortly after this message. If you are an overwhelmed and completely confused mom who just wants a simplified, easy to follow, and understandable plan when it comes to their health and wellness journey, then you're in the right place. As a wellness coach, I focus most on empowering women to follow a highly personalized and bio-individual plan that actually gets you results and that feels sustainable for your longevity. I'd love to invite you to set up a free coaching call to talk about your health and wellness journey. Head to erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call today. Again, that URL is erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call. And to make it even easier, head to the show notes of this podcast and click free coaching session to set up your call ASAP. Now let's dive back into the conversation. Balanced, I want to say, a little more in tune, a little more grace-filled for how you feel. I've talked about this before too, but so often women just beat themselves up and internalize how they feel, like if they can't be productive or if they feel low energy or if they want to say no, but they feel like they have to say yes. Like it's all of this internalizing for all of these different reasons. If we can start to really look through our health and how we feel through the lens of our 28-day secular nature, it changes how we really choose to see ourselves mentally and emotionally. And so how do you actually sync every day with your infradian rhythm? What does that actually look like? You know, one of the things that I've started to learn most about is fitness. So when you're in your menstrual phase, like really the key is to kind of keep it very low intensity. Most often you should be resting, especially the first 2 days of your cycle, trying to give yourself full rest. Those are when your hormones are potentially completely bottomed out and you don't really want to be overexerting yourself. Then when you get up into follicular and estrogen is rising and you have more energy, that's when you can start to build into more weight workouts, resistance training, add in some more cardio, things like that. When you get into ovulation, that can be a time where you can add some bursts of HIIT training and things like that. Sometimes, depending on who you are and your bio-individual health, you have a little bit more resiliency in your cycle at that time. And then once you get into luteal and estrogen starts to drop off and progesterone starts to rise, that's a great time to get into some more low intensity work, mobility work, yoga, some lighter weightlifting, like eccentric movement weightlifting and things where you're slowly releasing the moves on the way down. Things like that really make a difference. And it doesn't necessarily lead to overtraining or feeling burned out and kind of pushing through, which oftentimes women do, especially when it comes to training. And so training with your infradian rhythm can be one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself when it comes to health, because it prevents, again, potentially overtraining or leading to burnout in some capacity. The thing that I love the most about really working with your physiology is just understanding how it really is our superpower. It doesn't have to be this thing that feels so unknown or cliche to talk about. It can be this thing that we start to normalize. And it's a way to actually give ourselves this concept of building sustainable health and building ways to actually be more productive based on when our energy is feeling more productive, right? And when we can actually get into this place of more self-compassion rather than beating ourselves up in some way. And I know in the work that I do with my clients, this is a mindset thing that we work through in a very deep way. Because again, so often women say to themselves, well, what's wrong with me? Well, why don't I feel this way? Or why don't I feel that way? Or why does training feel harder on certain days? Or why do I feel ravenous at certain points in my cycle? And, why do things potentially feel so hard for me to figure out? And this is really the key that I want to empower you with. If you don't already, start to track your cycle. It is one of the most profound things you can do at any point in your life. If you are a mom listening to this in your 20s, 30s, 40s, if you are a grandma listening to this who has a daughter, who has grandkids, who has other people in your family community that you want to share this with, this is one of the most beneficial things any of us as women can do. Start tracking your cycle. Know what your physiology is doing. As you start tracking, this will give you a better glimpse into what's happening in different phases, how long those phases are lasting. The next step of tracking your cycle is starting to track symptoms, how you feel, how your energy is. Are you experiencing anything that's not really pleasant, like bloating, gas, acne, all of those things? Like all of that data can be a driver to how you show up in your wellness, but it will become imperative data as you get into more midlife health, kind of where I'm at. And this is information that I wish I would have had a much better grip on 10, 15, 20 years ago. I never really did any of this deeper dive work on female physiology and working with my body until the last 5 or so years. And if I knew then what I know now, this is what I would tell myself. I would say, start tracking, start paying attention to energy and symptoms, and start really understanding what your infradian rhythm is uniquely doing in your life, because it is a huge piece to overall vitality and wellness, especially when it comes to longevity. And as a midlife health coach, this is one of the things that I start talking about most with my clients. I gauge where cycles are at. What does that feel like? What are the symptoms that they're experiencing? And then from there, we figure out, how do we optimize their health? Is there certain testing we need to have done? Are there certain lifestyle shifts we need to make? What do we need to do to make sure we're working with your physiology? That is really the key when it comes to being a woman and actually maximizing how we feel in our day-to-day life. And so I wanted to share a little bit more about infradian rhythm today, because I know this is something that we aren't taught. I've shared this before, but I was never taught any of these deeper dive details related to female physiology until recently, as I've gone through more certifications, as I've learned from different experts. And I truly wish on a very deep level, I would have learned this as a teenager. The importance of really getting a grip on my cycle and infradian rhythm and why that would really matter for my health. I'm learning that firsthand now. And as I learn more, I want to share the knowledge and make sure that I'm passing this on to other women so you can pass it on to the women in your life and in your communities that are important to you. As a mom of 2 girls, I've already started talking to my older daughter about how she has to be tracking her cycle, how she needs to be in tune with her body, how I want her to start to pay attention to how she feels. This is one of the most crucial pieces to our health. It truly is. And again, it can become our superpower, not this hidden thing that we don't talk about. It can be our superpower. And I want to be a voice in the wellness space, and when it comes to women's health, that continues to help normalize the importance of having these conversations. Like I said, if you're not already, make sure you're tracking where your infradian rhythm is at. It is literally the thing that will be most transformative as your health evolves over time. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.